I'm Jonathan Pokluda, and I want to welcome you to this series on anxiety and peace. I'm so excited. I'm Jonathan Pokluda, and I want to welcome you to this series on anxiety and peace. I'm so excited about this series because we're going to be talking about how anxiety has played a role in so many of our daily lives and how it can keep us away from God. That's my story. For a long time, I was running at a fast pace, continued to add the daily challenges of work onto my life and pursued God and felt all the have-tos, you have to do this and you have to do that. And it felt like I ran 100 miles an hour into a brick wall. One day I was at a speaking engagement in California and I was lying in my hotel room bed and I was, all of a sudden I didn't feel right. My heart was beating funny. In fact, it would beat in a way that would shake my whole body, and I knew that something was wrong. I knew that I desperately needed sleep, but I couldn't sleep. The thoughts and the worries of this world were running around my mind, and I couldn't find rest. I went ahead with that speaking engagement. I flew back to my home, and I went straight to the emergency room. And I remember standing in front of the doctor saying, "What's wrong with me?" And they said, "Well, you have some irregular heartbeats." I looked at the doctor and I said, "Well, can you fix it?" And they said, "No, but you can." I was like, "What do you mean I can?" I said, "Well, you need to slow down. This is caused by stress. It's caused by anxiety. It's caused by worry. You're carrying too much." And so I'm so passionate about this series, and I want you to know that if you're out there and you struggle, you're not alone. In this series, I want to build our confidence in the peace that God offers, but also make us aware of the physical and medical dangers that anxiety can cause. We're going to use God's word to see God's perspective on how and why anxiety plagues our society. We're going to talk about anxiety's tendencies to rob us of our peace of mind and keep us from the physical and spiritual rest that Jesus offers us. We'll also hear stories from people with jobs, children, friends, and busy schedules just like many of us, and see how their Christian faith informs their battle with anxiety. But before we dive in, I want to highlight something really important about anxiety. I'm coming at this issue from a pastoral standpoint. I'm not a licensed counselor or therapist. I know that sometimes we need professional medical help with our anxiety. And I don't want you to think that this series is ignoring that reality. If that's you today, please get help if you haven't already. And know that there is no shame in seeking help. For me, that was something that I had to do. At first I talked to my community, I talked to my pastor, and eventually I went to counseling. And I pursued professional help, and that was something that God used in my life. God has placed professional counselors and therapists in our lives to help heal us. So let's get started and watch God's power confront anxiety and bring comfort to us as His people. My prayer is that God would transform the way you think about anxiety, that He would move in gracious ways to bring about healing, restoration, and peace in your life. As we begin, listen to Anthony's story. Anthony shows us how people-pleasing and unrealistic expectations for ourselves can lead us down a path towards anxiousness. Watch this.
So one of the things I've learned is being an artist, you have a lot of people you need to please. Earlier on, I was just pleasing people. My goal was to make people feel like I was the best. I'm greater than everybody. Even as, I'm a Christian, I love the Lord, love Jesus, and I am serving His purpose in what I do. But as I serve His purpose in what I do, oftentimes it becomes about me. It becomes about my hustle. I'm big on work, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. And because I'm like that, I often fall into the place of feeling like I'm a superhero. I end up taking what should be God's and putting it on myself. And I start not getting sleep. I start overworking. I start not prioritizing my time because I feel like it's my job to do it all. And I remember after I put out this album, how it was, in my opinion, it had better beats and it had better rapping. I remember the emptiness. And I was like, what is this feeling that I'm feeling that doesn't feel right? And I realized in that moment that I was trying to be somebody I wasn't. I was trying to please people. I was trying to please everybody by proving I was great. I was proving I was this. But internally, I knew something was wrong. And so what I came to the point was I went to talk to a pastor and I shared my heart. And I was like, man, I just feel like something's wrong. And I remember this pastor, he told me, he said, he was the first person I ever heard say this. He said, sometimes we need help to figure out what we need to pray for. And he was like, and that help can come from a counselor. And from that moment, I ended up going to a counselor. And I remember in the first 2 sessions, he changed my life, like with the stuff that he told me. Because once he was able to help me start pinpointing what it was, I was instantly able to go to my prayer closet and be like, Lord, this is what I need. But he also helped me understand that this is not gonna be something that happens overnight. And I realized in the middle of that I had a decision that I had to decide it's either God's peace or my pride. I had to let go of being validated all the time. And I believe like validation and affirmation, it is a false drug for anxiety. And so as I made that transition and I said, I'm gonna be who God's called me to be, I'm gonna be content in the Lord, in what I'm doing, it was like all this fear and all this, it literally just, it seeped away, you know? And as I've continued to be a creative, it always is there because you're always having to say, okay, I gotta pull back and be who I'm supposed to be. I have to lean on the Lord for the rest of my life.
Well, you may not be in the music industry, but I'm sure you can relate to some of Anthony's story. He was carrying so much weight and pressure and eventually talked to a pastor and got help through counseling and was able to move to a place where he realized that this movie, this story, this life that he exists in is not all about him. And I think for so many of us, that's the mistake that we make, is we go through this world trying to make it all about us. In fact, I think this is foundational to the highest levels of anxiety and the highest levels of panic attacks that we've ever seen in the world. I think we're trying to make too much of ourselves. We're trying to receive too much glory for us. This glory, it must be offloaded onto the sturdy shelf of Jesus Christ. We see this in the Gospels. As you turn Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there's a question that the disciples, the followers of Jesus, asked repeatedly. They would say, Jesus, which of us is the greatest? Which of us can sit at your right and your left in your glory? And it continues to say that they argued about this. In fact, I love how Jesus addresses this in Mark chapter 10. He says, you don't understand what greatness is. Whoever wants to be great among you must be a servant. And whoever wants to be the greatest must be slave of all. And then in verse 45, he says, for even I didn't come to be served. And this is Christ. He's the ruler of the world. He says, I didn't come here to be served, but I came here to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. That true greatness is actually found in loving and serving others. I think the faster we can realize this, the faster we can begin to experience relief from our own anxiety. The quicker we can give our lives away, not under the pressures of trying to get something from others, but just to be a conduit of God's grace to others and to see our lives as that, the faster or the sooner, the quicker we experience healing. This life was not meant for us to receive as much glory as we possibly can. I was in a movie once. It's interesting. A friend of mine was actually filming a movie and asked if I would like to play a role, in this film, and it was going to be shown in the theaters and everything. And I went to where they were filming, and we shot this quick scene. And then I went to see the movie in the theaters, and I was on the screen for about 15 seconds. I just had this tiny, tiny cameo role. And it would be crazy for me to go and tell everyone, hey, did you see that movie that I started? Did you see that movie that was all about me? And yet so many of us, we think about life this way. We walk into a room and wonder what everybody is saying about us, what everybody's thinking about us. We're counting likes and followers and wondering how great we can actually be. Meanwhile, our anxiety is going through the roof and we don't know why. It's because you weren't meant to be great like that. Jesus, when he was here, he redefined greatness, and for us to pursue greatness, we must pursue it as he's intended, which is service. This life's not about you. This life's not about me. From beginning to end, it is all about King Jesus. To understand this better, I want you to hear Genesis' story and how she realized that she was putting too much pressure on herself in her work and her environments and trying to receive greatness until she was able to come to a similar conclusion. Watch this.
After graduating and was able to get a job in my career field in New York City, like, you know, the city where I wanted to be, and that I told my family, like, this is what I'm gonna do. We're gonna do this job in this great city, and this is what it's going to be. So I start working, and I'm like, I am here, I've made it, I'm in my field, this is awesome. As I kept going, I think my subconscious was like, you don't like it. This is not what you want to do, which caused me to have slip-ups and mess-ups. And I had painted this picture for myself of what it was supposed to be, and it wasn't adding up to that picture. I wasn't excelling at this job that I thought I wanted. I wasn't, you know, blowing it out of the water. Knowing that everyone back home was rooting for me to be successful at this job and climb the ladder. I didn't want this to be the moment that I let them down. Work was kind of spiraling quickly out of control, and I was just so in my head about like trying to make everything work and not, you know, letting anyone in. I couldn't talk to anyone, like conversations were tough. I really just can't go too much further past trying to keep up appearances in a way. Like in that time frame, I just had even more weight on me, and it just didn't come to fruition of me like living up, of me doing what I needed to do. And like the next like review period came, and I got laid off. After getting laid off, I just kind of felt like I wouldn't be who they thought I was. Like I felt like, in a sense, like a failure. And I was like, well, if I think this about me, that clearly has to be what they're going to think like when I go to them with this. And so I kept it to myself, but then I got to a point where like I couldn't do that anymore because I didn't want to keep being sad and being weighed down, just like my whole situation. One day I was like talking to my mom. I finally, you know, just had to say like, it didn't work, and here I am, and I no longer have a job. And in that moment, she was more just concerned about me and how I was, and it just kind of reaffirmed for me, like, I wasn't that job, and I wasn't that position, and I wasn't, like, my status at that time. As more people found out, I realized that I was holding on to this idea of, like, having to be, like, this perfect, polished person, in everyone's eyes, and like even in God's eyes. I think that was when I realized they weren't expecting me to be anything that like I had been putting on.
Well, that story from Genesis reminds us of the pressures that the world can put on us as we continue to work and we continue to seek the affirmation from other people. And as they affirm us and tell us that we're doing a good job, often the temptation for us is to continue to run faster and try harder and to do more, all while pretending to have peace. And what we don't realize is when the pressures of the world comes on our shoulders, what it's going to do is crush us. And the solution is not to continue to pretend to have peace, but to actually reach out for help from others, from those in our communities, pastors, counselors, people in our life. Say, hey, I'm carrying more than I can handle right now, or I'm running at a pace that's not sustainable for me. And a lot of times the solution or the resolution to our panic and to our worry and to our anxiety comes from us reaching out for help. You weren't meant to sustain it all. Even science teaches us this. Science, for a long time, scientists believed that the Earth was at the center of our solar system, that all of the planets revolved around the Earth. This was called the geocentric theory. Nicholas Copernicus shows up on the scene and he says, no, all of the solar system actually revolves around the sun. And he founded the heliocentric theory, that the sun is at the center of our solar system. When we try to live our lives like we are at the center of our universe, it's like we believe in a meocentric theory. You're not at the center of it all. No, we have to put Christ at the center of everything. Only with Jesus at the middle can everything be sustained. This is a Christocentric belief, that Jesus is at the center of everything, that he holds all things together. And so the solution for us is not to run faster, it's not to do more, it's not to try harder, it's to acknowledge that Jesus is at the center. And for you and me, something practically we can do is just reach out for help. So as we wrap up session one, what I want to encourage you to do is audit your life. How much is on your plate? How fast are you running? Are you trying to pretend to have peace when you really don't? When you're struggling in this season? If you're struggling in this season, I want you to reach out for help. As you discuss in your small groups, I want you to talk about, hey, how are you doing right now? And ask for prayer from others. Thank you for listening to session one.